Hello there, and welcome back to some more Gran Turismo 5. Today we'll continue on Let's Play, and this is episode 47. In today's episode, we are taking a look at the AMG Driving Academy in the advanced difficulty within the special event. Once again, AMG Driving Academy. Did you think we shot of it last time? No, of course we're not. There's still 2 more rounds of this to go, and we're going to get rid of one of them today. Advanced, and we are back in the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Coupe. Why are we back in that, you may ask? Well, it's because now the AMG Driving Academy is going to teach us how to drive on a wet Nürburgring. And when I say they're going to teach us how to drive on a wet Nürburgring, what I really mean is they're going to teach us how to drive on a wet Nürburgring with not wet tyres. You see, the default tyres for this are Comfort Softs, which aren't really ideal wet weather tyres. You'd think, considering the game does have wet weather tyres in it, it used wet tyres, but it doesn't, so here we are. Now, despite all of this, and despite how my driving might look in this, how much does that actually affect the Driving Academy overall? As you can already see, the exact tactic we're going to be taking for all of this, well, the answer is not a lot, really. Sure, grip is reduced and you've got more chance of going off, but also the time limits are far more generous now. I think the time limit for this in the beginner stage is a 1:36 for gold. In the case of this time round, it's a 1:49, so you get an extra 13 seconds to play around with. And while it may look like it, this doesn't slow you down all that much, so I actually find that this is easier than the AMG Driving Academy beginner. Sure, again, you know, in terms of the conditions, maybe not, you do have to have a little bit more wits about you, but the time limits are far less of an issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that carries over into the expert version of this, where we get back into the SLS, but in the terms of the 300 SL, it isn't too bad. As usual, track knowledge is probably required for this for gold, although if you've done the last few AMG Driving Academies, you probably should know the track by now, or at least have a deeper understanding of where certain things is. I say understand the track, I even to this day still probably can't tell you where the Nürburgring goes in certain parts of it, but there you go. Also 148 grand for each one of these, so, and I mean there's 5 of them, so this is definitely worth doing. Don't get me wrong, AMG Driving Academy not exactly the most interesting thing in the world, but considering you're going to be making 750 grand from all of this, then I guess that makes it not too bad. Anyways, in terms of tips for the AMG Driving Academy, because we may as well speak about the same things we've spoken the last 2 times we've done this, as I start beeping for no reason. Yeah, track knowledge pre-required for gold. I do recommend turning the traction control off because it makes things easier. And the most crucial piece of information I can give you from all of this, corner cutting isn't disqualification, and so as a result I recommend a lot of it. As you saw in section 1, we cut a fair bit of the little chicane that they put down there. That wasn't really intentional, that's just sort of where the car got thrown offline. Sector 2, however, I do recommend taking that big cut at Forst, I think this corner's called, which I've butchered every single time I've said it, but there you go. Yeah, you can take a huge chunk of grass out of that one, and that's what I'd recommend doing, because you save yourself a fair couple of seconds doing that, which is, well, the name of the game, really. If the game's not going to disqualify you for it, I class it as a very legal technique, and no one in the comment section has complained, which is good, because I tell them to get fucked, because it's the Nürburgring, who cares? You know, if you want to do it properly, you go ahead and do it properly. However, I personally do not like the track, and anything I can do to minimise my time on said track is something I will absolutely go ahead and take to the bank. As you can see for the rest of this, I am terrible at it, absolutely terrible, with getting a 1 tyre fire throughout there, doing some absolute mad drifting skills, and yet despite all of that, I finished this, I think I finished this 4 seconds in front of the gold pace. So that really just shows you how much time you take out of that grassy knoll, how much time you can take out from the grass section, whatever. yeah, it shows you how much time you can take out of that in terms of giving yourself an advantage, and it also shows you how truly easy the time limits are here. Really, there's, like I say, it's not particularly strict, and I find it easier. You know, track conditions not quite as easy to drive in, but in terms of actually getting the times, they make it easier. So, and to be honest with you, I don't even remember having too many issues with the Expert. I think the AMG Driving Academy in general is just easier in the wet, just so long as you're more aware of the car losing grip. But as you can see here, actually it's not quite as much of a blowout as I expected, but considering how awful I was driving, to beat that by 2 seconds, yeah, that's pretty good. So, and as I've said before, I'm definitely not a Nürburgring expert, so, you know, if a competent person's doing this, they can take even more time out of this doing that, which would be nice. Anyways, on to Sector 3, which is arguably the hardest sector of all of Nürburgring. Yeah, this one is the one where there's not really all that much opportunity for grass cutting, and you need to just essentially have a nice big pair of bollocks to get yourselves through some of the fast corners. This is the northern section of the Nürburgring, I think. So, it's just a lot of flat out corners. In fairness, because you're in the rain, grip is reduced, but also do remember that there's some nice barriers at the side of the course, so technically you could just bounce off those and keep a fair amount of speed. I can't remember, do I brake for this bit here? I am going to brake for this bit, go third gear, hug the curb. Yeah, that's probably the way to do it. You could try and take that flat out. You might be successful taking that flat out, but I don't think it's a particularly viable way of doing it. Again, if you clatter into the walls, it's not really a big issue, because the game doesn't disqualify you. So, I dread to think what this challenge would be like if the game actually did disqualify you for going off the track. We've certainly seen in some other challenges the game has, because you can't corner, you can't smash into walls. I know this is going to sound bad, but then again, I never claimed to be very good at these games. It does make the challenge a hell of a lot harder, especially with one challenge in particular, which we will get to later, and I will firmly say I have been beaten by, and I'm not interested in continuing to rerun it. But we've still got a while to go before we reach that point in the game, and I'm sure you all know what I am referring to. So the big thing with Sector 3 is the final corner of this has the finishing line very, very close to the end, which is a good thing, because it essentially means so long as you know where that finish line is, you can absolutely send it around that corner, because you don't have to worry about the next section. You can go on the grass, whatever, it doesn't really matter, because you're not setting yourself up for the next section, which means when you are doing the full course run, don't take the same line that you take through the third sector here, but it is something you can do. We are actually coming up to that now, just going to get through this corner, a lot of understeer, and then this corner you can just absolutely, you don't really need to brake and all the rest of it, because the line's just there. As you can see, we're 3 seconds ahead of the time, and that's without any corner cutting or whatever, so the time limits are definitely a lot more doable in the rain, which is a key theme for this episode. I'm going to keep mentioning it because, as I've said before, it's the Nürburgring time trials. There's just not all that much to really mention here. I don't know why this is dragging on as long as it is. Anyways, now that that's done, we get to move into our final sector, sector number 4 for the Nürburgring, and this is one, once again, where you can take a decent amount of the track out of it, take a decent chunk. So, on to sector 4, final sector of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, which includes the Giant Straight. So, let's get into this. Also, I haven't mentioned this, but we get a lovely colour for the 300 SL. You know, usually the game likes to go with the silver, which, you know, I guess silver is the iconic colour for the 300 SL. I mean, it's a silver arrow after all, but, you know, I like the orange, this sort of like potted orange colour, if you will. I think it's the same colour they use for the Chrome Line cars, well, I think they were a pre-order bonus in this game, and then you could actually just drive them in GT6. Very nice looking cars. The 300 SL definitely suits the fancier colours. It's a very nice looking car, 300 SL. I do like it. Maybe not my favourite of the classic-y sports cars, and I wouldn't pay how much are one of these now, like 2 million or something, but you know, still nice cars. I think the Gullwing Coupe definitely looks better than the convertible as well. I'm never really much a fan. Actually, that was going to be the controversial takeaway from this episode if you listen in this long. I don't think I've liked a single Mercedes SL model. I just don't think any of them look particularly good. I mean, the Pagodas, the original Pagodas, they're okay. I just think the headlights look a little bit weird. The SL after that, the 80s one with the sharp styling, I really don't like that. I'm not a fan of 80s Mercedes styling, and that... Oh, actually, no, I like the 90s one. What am I talking about? That one's alright, the bigger, sort of fatter one. And then they had the one they released in 2002, the Gran Turismo concept one. That one I'm not really a big fan of. That's the one that Clarkson owned. I think it's growing on me a little bit more, but it's not quite there. And then every SL previous has just looked like a version of that with slightly different makeup, and it just never really looks quite right. The worst one, the new one is not a good looking car. I'm surprised they've launched a new SL, to be honest with you. Yeah, a bit of an interesting decision by the Mercedes-Benz. But there you go. I'm not a fan of the Mercedes current design language in general, where they all have the same headlights and they all just look like they're melted versions of the previous ones. Because I actually didn't mind the previous ones. Like the previous generation A-Class, not a bad looking car, but the new one just sort of looks a bit melted and strange. Anyways, where were we? Oh yeah, section 4. This is the big cut you can take. You can get a nice bit out of that grass banking, slide on over to here. Don't really have to brake, to be honest with you. And then as long as you slow it down for the final corner, get around there, sprint to the line, as you can hear that one wheel peeling because this is an old car, and we beat it by 1.5 seconds. So there you go. That is gold on Sector 4. And now you have seen all 4 sectors that make up a good Nürburgring lap. So, as a result of that afterwards, as of course you have seen several times now, after you've completed all 4 sectors, you go on to a full course run, which is completed with traffic. Other Mercedes cars are around, but that doesn't really make things all that difficult. And as when we've done this previously, I am going to leave you to enjoy the full course run just because there's not a lot to discuss. I will say they are very generous on the times they give you. In fact, if I remember rightly from this one, very, very generous, as we'll see towards the end. But I will join you at the end of this lap, because ultimately these are sectors we've been through before. You know what you're doing. See you soon. Okay, so back on board the lap, and that's been a great lap, or that's been an appalling lap, I don't really remember. This once again was recorded on the 18th of November, 2021, so it's been a while since I've seen this footage. Anyways, what I will say is, just skipping ahead briefly, I did look, I'm actually 20 seconds quicker than the target gold lap time, so not really much to worry about in terms of the lap time, and as I've been saying from the start, ultimately I think this version of the AMG Driving Academy is actually a lot easier than the beginner and the intermediate stages of it. Anyways, there's our final makeup of 148 grand, and we get quite a lot of XP. So let's get out of here and let's take a look at our prize vehicles, because we do get some. Maybe not quite as much of a bombshell as the previous ones were. The intermediate, we got some very nice prize cars. Here we get an A160 for bronze, we get a C63 for silver, and we get the SLS AMG for all gold. So again, not quite the CLK LM that we got previously, but there you go. Unfortunately, no interesting colours on any of the cars we got. We just get a very plain silver A160, not the magnificent purple that came in. We get this sort of dark grey C63, which isn't great, and then also I think we get basically the same colour for our SLS. To be fair, C63 SLS cool cars, certainly useful in some of the later stages of the game. A160, not so much by this point. You've probably done everything you need to, and every single thing that the A160 that you can do in the A160 you can do in any other car, although you don't have to worry about falling over. Yeah, we have to make that joke when it comes to the first generation A-Class. A very, very odd looking first generation A-Class. Anyways, from odd looking to great looking, C63 AMG, probably my favourite looking of all C-Classes. Absolute menace of a thing. Really cool car. I'd use it for one of the championships coming up, but I found something more interesting at the last minute. And then the SLS. Of course, we all know what the SLS looks like. It was one of the cover cars for this game. In fairness, the one we've got comes with these fantastic coloured seats inside, which is very nice, but ultimately I would have preferred a different colour for my SLS. Anyways, that's it for the AMG Driving Academy and this episode. Thank you all very much for watching. Next time I'm going to be taking a look at our final special event for this block of the game, the Top Gear Test Track Advanced. So join us for that. Until then, farewell.
Yes, I will stay here for a while, for I need the break. A break from the bruises of life and everything that lay in the past.